Yo, yo, yo! Welcome to the Delinquent Show. We've got JP. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I am very good.
We've got Peaky Blinders Blakey in the house.
How we doing, boys? How we doing?
And guess who else we got in the house? We got the new Hall of Famer, the Doctor, and I call him the Doctor, Dr. JJ. What's happening, JJ? I'm loving the Christmas tree in the background, but it's about time that went.
Hi. It's good to be here.
Loving the polar neck, lad. That's a 70s style polar neck. You're taking over Blakey's role. It's looking beautiful. How have you been, brother?
Freezing.
Freezing?
Yeah, it's freezing cold.
Hey, man, that's England, man. How have you been, brother?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too
Good
bad.
to have you on the show. Good to have you on the show. So
Yeah,
what I want to start with, Joe, when did you start playing this silly old game?
Golly, I guess I was about 15, I think, or 16, 15. So what's that, about 1978? Yeah, back then, you know, I was messing around at a youth club in Tottenham, which you'll be familiar with, in Tottenham, because obviously you and I grew up in very close to each other. We went to the same primary school, didn't we? So,
Don't be telling any of those secrets, Joe, about me playing football, you know, in goal. I don't want to hear them on my show. Don't try and embarrass me, brother.
No, that story is in the vault. And so, yeah, I was messing about at this youth club, and I was recruited, for want of another word, by Graham Young.
A future Hall of Famer. Another Hall of Famer.
Yeah, quite right. And so he did so much development and, you know, recruiting, and he did so much for the game. And he just said to me one day, look, you know, I'm starting up a team here in Haringey. Do you fancy coming and having a go? So I said, yeah, all right. I mean, I wasn't a regular wheelchair user then. You know, I only used it sort of part-time anyway. So I turned up at New River. And that was it, really. I became obsessed. I think that's a fair word. You know, it was an obsession. It became an obsession from day one.
Wow. So 1978.
Yeah.
When did you start in the league?
Well, the team formed, and, you know, it was a mixture of new players and players who had already played previously. So the likes of Graham and Joe Fletcher and Mike Carafalides, guys like that, you know, had played before, and then there was a few of us who'd not played before. So we spent the first sort of few months to a year playing friendlies and tournaments, stuff like that. And I think then our first entry into the league must have been around 79, 80 maybe.
Wow. That seems a long time ago, because I think I joined the team around about 81, 82.
Something like that. Yeah, you came a little bit later. And, you know, I think Gordon Perry had already joined, hadn't he, when you turned up?
Yeah. So what was training like at that time? You know, what did you do for training and those sort of things?
Look, it was fairly basic. And, you know, back then, you know, Graham was our coach, our first coach, and it was fairly basic, mate. It was just, you know, we do some drills, layups, and a bit of shooting, and it was scrimmaging. Not ideal, I mean, you know, in the long run, but that's how things were. So it was all cool. Very basic, you know, 101 basketball stuff.
So back in the day, as you know, Joe, back in the day, as you know, when I first started and I met you down at Stoke Mandeville Nationals, I had a T-shirt made with your name on, saying Joe Jayaratne plus Van der Linden equals Pollock. So you was one of my role models when I started. Did you have one back in that day?
I had several, Johnny. I mean, when I first started playing, I think the first sort of couple of people that really influenced me were Abu Yila and in particular Ray Cross, who was a fantastic player. I think I wrote a little piece for you, didn't I, about him, because you were inducting him into your Hall of Fame, quite rightly so. But Abu was a fantastic player. I mean, I think he was like a 1.5 stroke 2 at the time. 1.5 would say, but really, really quick. And he could shoot the ball, and he was ultra aggressive in defence. A really, one of those players that players come and watch. And I remember when I first started playing, there was all this talk amongst players who'd already played. When they first saw me play, they said, "Oh, it'd be interesting to see which of you two is quicker, you or Abu," because he was very quick at the time.
Yeah.
And so there's always talk about who was quicker, me or him. And so he was a big influence on me. But I think Ray went on to become a bigger influence on me in the British game, because obviously in those days we didn't have access to seeing European players or American players. So the only people you got to see were British players back then.
And was Ray good in his day?
Ray was fantastic, mate. I mean, look, by his own admission, I think if he'd have been a bit more athletic, if I can put it like that, he would have ruled the world. He is to this day probably the most naturally gifted British player that I've seen, alongside Phil Pratt, who I think is also up there as far as natural talent goes. And there have been some really good players, yourself included in that list, obviously, Johnny. But Ray, for me,
JJ's
probably doing that on our show.
You are safe.
Probably doing that on our show, up in him, man. He don't need
hang on. Put the prosecco in the fridge. That's getting cracked open after.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Get off the show, Jay. Get off, man. Anyway, yeah, he was a decent player. He wasn't a bad player, anyway. So you started at Haringey Hornets. When was your first international competition? How did you get there? That's what we want to know, because it's really weird at the moment. We don't see how the kids are going to get to play for, train for GB. How did you get to GB?
Well, things were really, really funny back then, because we had a handbook, as some of you will remember.
Yeah. And
in the handbook were printed the dates of the GB training and the venues, and it was once a month. And basically, when I first started playing, if you thought you had a chance of getting in a team, you could just turn up for GB training, wherever it happened to be. But I waited to be invited, and I think my first training session was up in Preston somewhere.
The prison?
Not the prison, no. That was Weymouth, wasn't it?
Yep.
That came later, and obviously there's an amusing story saying where you and I were at a training session once, and there was a prison riot, wasn't it? They burnt the prison down. We had to leave training early in the middle of the night. But anyway, my first session, getting back to your question, was at a venue in Preston, along with all the other GB boys at the time.
And when was your first official competition, and what was it?
My first senior cap was in '87 at the European Championships in Lorient. I think you were there too, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that was my first senior cap.
And how bad were we at that time, as in European standard or world standard?
We were poor, I suppose. We'd always come sort of bottom half, if not near the end, certainly in Europe and also in the world. I mean, I remember that tournament in Lorient, the European Championships, because Van der Linden was also there as a young player, and he came on we played the Dutch. He came on, and Mike McCready, who was our coach at the time, said, "Right, on you go, lad, and you mark him." So I said, "Right then." So I went on, and accidentally poked him in the eye, and he went off. I got the foul called against me. I poked him in the eye accidentally, and I was subbed off and didn't play the rest of that game either. So that was
you done your job, because obviously he didn't play the rest of the game either.
No, I see nothing wrong with that.
They patched him up.
I see nothing wrong with that style of defence, Jay, at all. I think that's
that'd
the
be
way
quite
to go.
mild in your book, wouldn't it, Blakey?
Yeah,
sure. So, what was your first World Championship? Was it 1990, Joe?
Well, no, I had a bit of a hiatus where I had a bit of a falling out or a difference of opinion with the coaching staff at the time.
Tell us about it. Everybody seems to have a little bit of a falling out. I think I had a hiatus with that same coach.
Yeah, but was that which one of you two had the untidy garden?
That was
me.
Well, what it was that at the time, so I'd made the '87 team, and I went and I made the '88 team for the Paralympics in Korea, and then there was the coaches called me up one day, and I went to see them. There was a meeting, and the talk was that they said, "Look, we've heard that you're not training as often and as you should be," and I inquired as to where they'd heard that, because they said they'd heard that. So obviously they'd heard from a third party or a fourth party, and they weren't willing to divulge that. And we had a falling out over that, basically, and that lasted over a year, maybe a couple of years. So for the '90 World Championships, you went, didn't you, Saint? But I didn't.
I knew there's a reason. I told him.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Who got in? Who got in when you got kicked out, Joe? And there he is. Look, silent assassin.
He was already in, and deservedly so. But I mean so there was that sort of, and then I was a bit petulant because I was asked back the year after, but I was still a bit pissed off about it all, so I said no. But then things, the rift got healed mainly due to Gordon Perry, who sort of put his arm around me and sort of was a bit of a go-between between myself and Mick Grady. And that rift was here, and I came back into the team after that.
I know that.
So yeah, so did you go to you went to 1992 in Barcelona? We need to know about the game that you played against Spain. Is it the group game or the crossover game, whichever it was? Because it looked like a riot. We can't find the game.
Yeah, I mean, I wish you could find the game because it was extraordinary, and it was an extraordinary experience and something which I hadn't seen before, and I haven't seen since, really. Where it was the stadium was a 12,500 capacity, and it was absolutely sold out to the last seat, and there were like 4,000 people outside, and it was an extraordinary experience. We played this game. It's a very close game, which we won, but in somewhat controversial circumstances, where the referee at the very last called a travelling infringement on one of their players, and we've looked at it again and again. It was travelling infringement, but anyway, it meant they lost possession. They didn't get the last possession of the game. We won the game. The crowd went nuts. They were throwing things at us, bottle tops, at tennis balls, and
just like being in Tottenham, lad.
That game, the game is actually on our YouTube channel. That's that clip. We've got about 8 minutes to the end of the game. That's it, because that's the travel.
That's the end. But what happened after that made the next game even more controversial, because so we won that game. They were really, really furious. And what happened was we'd all had a shower and we were going to leave. And one of their players saw the referee for that game just standing around, and he just couldn't help himself. I think he went and threw a glass of water at him or something like that. And consequently, he was banned for the next game. And we'd already played, I think that was a group game, and then we had to play them another game in that same tournament. And what happened was he was banned, and the next game the crowd were even more fierce, and they had banners saying, you know, like justice for Zurita, and it was the hellhole. There were people baying for blood outside. All the cafes, all the bars nearby were all packed out, and we won that game as well. So yeah, I mean, it was extraordinary. And when it came time to leave, the police actually held us back because they said you need to wait until the crowd outside the stadium calmed down a bit and dissipated, because we can't guarantee your safety.
Wow. Well, during that 13 years internationally, who was that one player that tormented the crap out of you? Who was the toughest player you played against?
The toughest, I mean, there were several, obviously.
Yep.
But I'd say, I mean, I had a very specific role in the team, especially at the start of my international career, which is, you know, I guess I was known more as a defensive specialist, if you want. So I think Patrick Griffin comes close to being at the top of that list of players that I had to mark.
Was he quick, Joe?
Sorry?
Was he quick?
Yeah, he was really quick. And
no,
you know,
camber really either, did he? Didn't have a lot of camber on his chair, did he, Griffin?
No, but that wasn't that unusual back in those days.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, I mean, if you look at I think you've got some footage on your YouTube channel of that Dordrecht versus Burke game. If you look at Michel Gradel,
yeah,
who was also a huge influence on myself, you know, hardly any camber on his chair, but boy, could he play. But Pat Griffin was a nightmare to mark.
Wow. Let's move on, because you go, obviously, Spain, was it fifth you finished? Ended up in Barcelona fifth. You go on to Atlanta, 1996. You get to the final.
Oh no, you're jumping, lad. You're doing that jumping again.
Yeah, but I'm not interested in 94. It's the World Championships.
No, stay with the years. 95, the final, Europeans, the gold medal.
Yeah.
Stevie Kane in the last 10 minutes basically scored all the points. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't need to tell people how good Stevie Kane was. And by the way, before we go on, I watched that interview that he did with you guys, and I want to confirm publicly what he said. That door for his car was not ever going to shut, and you broke that.
It was always going to shut. You guys told me to shut the. And do you remember what car it was, Joe? Do you remember what car it was?
Wasn't it a Rover or something like that?
No, it was a Ford Capri with that big long glass window. Ford Capri. It was always going to shut, and you guys told me to shut it. I remember it as bright as day.
No, you got that wrong. But anyway, listen, going back to the question, I mean, the final, against Spain, and Steve was, you know, he was a class player, by a long way, the best 2-point player in the world at that time. You know, he was, what can I say? Just a great player, and he showed up, and we won the final. But it was a long road. I mean, you know, we had to beat the Dutch, we had to beat the French, and you know, they were all really good teams back then. And you know, in order to beat the Dutch, who'd been a bit of an albatross around our neck, I remember we had to come up with a special plan to deal with Kun Janssen, who we couldn't deal with for the previous 2 years. And so, you know, we had to beat some good teams in order to at least make the final. And, you know, we played well, and it was a good final. And yeah, as you say, Steve Steve turned it on, and you know, it was a great moment.
Those teams were all loaded, weren't they, in them days? I mean, they all had a couple of real good shooters. Spain, Italy were up there, France, even Belgium were tough to play against, weren't they, with DeVos and people like that?
Yeah, you know, yeah, teams like Belgium, you know, they tested you always, but you never thought. I never felt we were going to lose to teams like Belgium or Italy, even at that time. It was really at that time, sort of the mid-90s. It was really all about the Dutch and the Spanish. And the French too. The French were a very good team at the time as well.
Yeah, so then we move on. You European champions. We go to 1996. You get to the final and you choke it. Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. We choked it. I don't think we can look any further than that. That we weren't good enough to close the game out. 18-point lead, I think it was at halftime. But Australia put in a performance that, I thought was one of the greatest sporting moments. I think Troy Sachs, to this day, that's the best I've seen a 4.5 play, in a game.
Yeah. I've seen the game too, but mine is, you was up by 18, but you made some changes. I don't think you needed to make changes, and that just changed I think you coming off the court changed the complex of the game, and Sachs just got going and he just never stopped.
I've heard a rumor that they had a phone box in their in the Australian dressing room, and he got changed, put a cape on for the second half because he went nuts.
Yeah, he did. I mean, they all played really well, but he obviously, he carried that team on the day, and I think he scored 44 points. Or thereabouts, and it was an extraordinary performance on his part. And retrospectively, I'm glad I was part of that in a way. But obviously, at the losing end, there'll be endless speculation, even all these years later, as to should we have done this, should we have done that? I don't know. I mean, I can't look any further than myself, and I have to ask, you have to ask yourself, were you good enough on the day? And I wasn't good enough on the day. And everybody else I think that's all you can do as a player. Well, ask yourself, were you good enough?
I'm not sure that you could have done anything. Sachs he was just unstoppable. Yeah. I don't know who could have stopped him that day. I don't know. I think
maybe not.
He could have carried on playing today and he'd still be doing what he's doing. He was just magnificent.
Yeah, it was a silver medal at the world level. That's nothing to blink your eyes at. That's special. That was special. Paralympic silver. We haven't matched it since, have we?
Well, we haven't, Johnny. But I can't. I'll tell you. There are still days when I wake up screaming because of that game. I mean, and I'm not even saying that as a joke. I literally do wake up screaming.
I think you're a bit like us, John. John, because 2002, we get to the world final, and we do the same. We have exactly the same situation with Paul Schulte. He just caught light, and we just couldn't do anything with him. And you wake up and you think, gee, man, that was our chance to get that gold medal. We should have got that gold medal, and I'm sure you feel the same with that.
I do. I mean, I think I knew that was my last Paralympics as well. So I knew that it was probably my last chance to win a Paralympic gold.
So then
in that era of the mid-90s greatness we had with GB, which memory is better of the silver? Is it the 94 silver or the 96 silver, Worlds or Paralympic?
Well, I think in a way, it was the 94 silver, because I think what we had to do to come together as a unit for that, because it was a strange situation, Johnny, where the two coaches we had weren't speaking to each other.
All right. I never knew
They'd
that.
had a falling out. And we had this situation where we were in this, I think, the semi-final. And we decided as a group of players away from the coaches that we got together. And I remember we took down, there was like a big notice board near the dining hall, and we took that down and we put some coins on it, and we worked out our plays and what we were going to do in certain situations, and we all agreed what we would do in, you know, under certain circumstances, and we mapped it out. And what we decided was that, irrespective of what the coaches said, this was our plan as a team, and that was the plan that we were going to execute in the semi-final.
You were lucky you had some proper leaders in that team as well, didn't you? With Nige, and was Dan Johnson was in there, weren't he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Colin, yourself. I mean, you had some proper brains in that team as well.
Yeah, you know, we were lucky to have the likes of Dan and Nige in the team at the time. Dan obviously was probably the best captain and coach that GB never had, wasn't he? So we were lucky to have those guys there. You know, we were lucky to have guys like Colin Price as players in the team as well, who was a leader, you know, on court, just the way he played. And you know, I hope to see him in your Hall of Fame soon, because he deserves to be in there.
Well, write in, Joe, write in, and we'll consider it.
I'll send a pigeon.
So, send a pigeon, yeah. So that was a question I was going to ask you, Joe, because obviously we're doing the Hall of Fame. Very difficult job that we've had to do. It's tiring, hard work. Who would you like to see? Give me 3 people that you want to see in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I think definitely Colin Price. I would have as one of them, because he in that era he changed the way that British guards played the game, and he just took it to that next level. And you'll all know that in all sports you need someone who sets the bar, and everybody else reaches for that bar. Yeah. And all sports have it. You know, it was Roger Federer, and everybody else had to reach that bar, or whoever it was in whichever sport. And Colin over here, I think he set the standard really, and he played the game in a way that really guards didn't play the game back then. And so I think, you know, he needs to be in there. And alongside him, I think Callum Gordon.
You're a Sheffield Steelers fan or something?
Sorry?
You a Sheffield Steelers fan or something?
In a way, yeah. They were a great team.
About the only team he didn't play for, Johnny.
So, yeah, and I think Callum Gordon did the same thing for Great Britain, where, you know, we'd always been a team that had really some of the best guards in the world. If you look at the guards that GB had, even back then, you know, the likes of Colin, you know, whoever it was, Dan, Mark Cheney. But what we lacked, where we couldn't compete with the other European teams, and particularly we couldn't compete with the Americans, was we didn't have a dominant, strong, big 4.5. You know, we had 4.5s, but they weren't quite up to competing with the likes of Tree Waller or Curtis Bell, or even Eric Beno or whoever. And then Callum Gordon came along, and here was this big guy who was big, he was strong, he was quick, he had a bit of a post-up shot, and he was the guy that really started the evolution of the modern GB team. And so I think he needs to be in there.
So that's 2. Give me one more.
One more. Well, who have you got in there already? You've got quite a few, haven't you, of the ones that I would normally go for? Give me another question, and I'll work on that one.
You'll work on that one. Okay, we're looking forward to work on that. You know, then why did you how did your retirement from international come about?
Look, I mean, I think I don't think I was ever going to get back into the team. I didn't make the team for 2000, and that was a good decision. I mean, Nigel Smith, who was my great friend and mentor,
another Hall of Famer,
and rightly so. He was the assistant coach at the time, but he was also the coach. You know, we coached Milton Keynes Aces together, and I'd had a very poor season, and he'd seen it all, obviously firsthand. So there was no escape for me. So quite rightly, I didn't make the 2000 Paralympic team, but I decided to retire at that point because I just didn't think I was good enough anymore to really go through the whole training process. And it takes a lot out of you, and you have to give up a lot in order to get fit. You to prepare for a Paralympic cycle. It doesn't start 2 months before or 6 months before. It starts a year out. Your preparation to prepare your body. So it takes a lot out of you, and I didn't think I could do that again. And if I thought I was good enough and that I had a good shot at making the team, I probably would have, tried again. But I didn't think that I was good enough, and I didn't think I really had a good shot at making the team. So that seemed like a reasonable point to.
So talking about my YouTube channel, what's the thing you've watched the most on it so far? Is it the 1989 Dordrecht Burke match?
I haven't seen the last quarter of that yet. I have watched that.
Well, you've got to watch that.
But I don't know what I watched the most, because I don't think I've watched anything more than once. But I think I watched a couple of times that the Dan Johnson winning shot quarter-final against the French back in the day.
Semi-final.
Yeah. Was it a semi?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was.
Do you think, Joe, that's the greatest comeback and ending of a game in history? It has to be.
I guess it's up there, Johnny. There'll always be someone who says that there are other contenders. So I think it's a bit of a reach to say it's the greatest comeback, but it was one hell of a comeback. There's no doubt about that. And one hell of an ending shot. If you look at it, all came down to Stevie Kane distracting the referee at the end.
Yeah, and doing that with his hand before he got the ball. I don't know what he was doing.
And the French, I don't know what the French were doing. I mean, they completely lost their heads, and to leave a shooting guard like Dan unmarked 8 feet away from the baseline. I mean, it's just unheard of.
Money in the bank.
If you do watch it, they left Dan unmarked 8 feet away from the basket because 3 of them sat on Simon on the 3-point line. They did realise where the threat was. It was Simon on the 3-point line.
But you didn't need 3 people to guard Simon even back then.
No, you didn't.
Got it.
Yeah, Joe. So that was a great game, that European game, when the last-minute winner. Wow. Probably one of the greatest endings.
Look, it was a fantastic end to the game. And the French were a very good team at the time, but I mean, if you look at it, really, they messed up. They can't. I don't think there's any way around it. If you look at it, they made 2 turnovers in those last 2 plays that they had the ball. The first one, they gave the ball straight to Simon. And then at the very last one, they had another possession. And I think Simon got a hand to it and it went out of court. So, and of course, defensively, they made a huge error. you can understand them double teaming Simon, but to leave someone like Dan Johnson free, if you're going to give someone a shot at the end of the game, it ain't going to be someone like him.
Not down on the baseline. That was his money shot.
Yeah. So they messed up, and to our credit, we took advantage of their mess ups.
So from there, you decide to give up international, and then you played overseas. What was that like? Because that must have been fun.
It was great fun. I think I made a big mistake in how I approached it. So I got a call. I'd had several calls in the past. From a long time back, from like 1993. I had a call from Italy saying would I come and play with Cantu, with Fabio Raimondi and Sri Waller back then.
Yeah.
And I remember I said, yeah, I'd go. But then at the last minute, Sri Waller pulled out. And I think Fabio wasn't there either. And I didn't feel that I could really carry a team without at least one of those two guys around as well. But I went to Italy, as you say, more recently, and I made the mistake of thinking that I was just a delivery boy, really, because I was playing with Troy Sachs and Brad Ness, two of the greatest players.
What team was that, Joe? What team was that? What team was that?
That was in Cantu.
Yeah.
Two of the greatest players, we've had, and I thought, well, I've got these two of the greatest players in the world in front of me. My job is to get them the ball, and that's what I did. I based my game around just knowing that one, if not both of them, at some point would get into a position where they had a favourable shot, and that was a mistake on my part. I misjudged that situation. What I should have done was played my natural game.
Yeah, you just wasted. That's just a wasted. You could shoot the ball, you could do all those things, and you're just gonna pass up the ball to those guys. Understandable. They're great guys, but you're a great player as well, world class yourself.
So I made the mistake of looking at it like that. But it was quite amusing and very Italian that they made a mistake. So I got a phone call from Troy Sachs one day in London. And he said, Joe, we're setting up a team here. Got Brad Ness. It was Brad's first season abroad outside of Australia as well. Got Brad Ness here. I'm playing here. Do you fancy it? We need a ball carrier. So, anyway, we had a talk and negotiated and whatever and agreed terms. And I went over. And so we got to the first training session. And so the coach at some point said, right, this is the five, how teams are built over there. They have a five and, they build their five and then everybody else around it. And so he said, so here's our five, JJ and Troy and Brad and a couple of other guys. And we looked at it and we said, but hang on. I said, you're half a point over here. You can't play this five. And they actually got me over there under the premise that they thought I was a 2.5. And they built this starting five. I'm just believing that I was a 2.5 and I was a 3. And so I didn't start any of the games there because obviously if I was on court, then we couldn't play the starting five that he wants to play. So I came off the bench in nearly all the games there.
That Italian classification system, Joe, I mean, if you'd have been classified over there at the beginning, you'd have been a 1.
Yeah. Yeah, or playing rugby.
Yeah.
So you played at that team, pretty successful team, but how did you get into the coaching part of it, Joe?
Sort of by hook, by default, really. I mean, I'd stopped. I wasn't playing internationally anymore. I played that half of the season, the second half of the season in Cantu, but didn't want to stay on. So I came back to England and played again for Aces. And then, what was it, in 2008 or 9, pardon me, I got a call from a team in Rome that Brad Ness was playing for. And Brad and I had shared an apartment, etc., up in Cantu. So, we were good mates by then, and, in constant contact. But, I got a call from the team that he was playing for in Rome saying, look, they're looking for a coach. Would you be interested? Now, I don't know how my name came up, to be honest with you, because I wasn't known as a coach. Obviously, I'd done some coaching with MK Aces. I'd helped out, I was assistant coach there for a long time with Nige. And I thought about it, and I thought, why not? It's, it could be a fun gig. So I did a lot of prep over the summer while I was on holiday with my parents. I prepped the whole sort of training sessions and things that I needed to do, and went over, and that was good. It was a good season, and we had a good team. Didn't win, but we were. It was good. It was a good experience, and that's how I started over there.
So then, obviously, you was over there coaching and all of that, and then you get opportunity with your buddy Nige, a Hall of Famer, and you coached the GB women's team in 2013. Tell me your experience of coaching those girls.
Well, I have to say it was one of the highlights of my time in basketball, because it was a big responsibility, because they had to qualify for the Paralympics, and the way to do that was to come top 3 at the European Championships. So there was pressure on to do that, and this was post 2012, where the women were basically left without a coach. What was it, 6 months or whatever it is after the Paralympics, the coaches from the Paralympics were no longer with the team, and they were approaching this pressured European Championships, and there was no coach in place. So what happened was, I think they approached Nigel, but he said he was willing to do it if I would do it with him. And so
basically, he roped you in.
I was, I think Dan Johnson was very much the go-between in that negotiation, and I agreed to do it. I was happy to do it with him. So yeah, we took on that job, and it was a difficult thing to do, because what we found was a very dispirited team who they were broken, and I think the experience of 2012 hadn't gone well for them. They'd had a very tough year or so for various reasons, and so it became obvious that one of our first objectives had to be to build up this team psychologically. And so that's what we did. We concentrated a lot on team building, and just building people up, bolstering them psychologically. But it was tough, because we had to drop a couple of players from 2012, and that was not an easy task. But on the other hand, we did see, during the training sessions, the open training sessions there, we had the selection sessions, a couple of new players that we selected in Joy Hazelden and Charlotte Moore, who were both juniors then. I think they were only like 14 or 15 years old, but we could see in them that they had a future if they stuck at it. So there was something to be proud of, because those two are now linchpins of the current GB team.
Yeah, great.
Or they were.
So did you get third there? I can't remember.
Yeah.
So obviously that's qualification. So you just told me how the year. Why don't you continue? Sorry. Go ahead, Jay. So always interrupting me.
Back in the day, in your prime, I'd say you was GB's first legitimate 3-point shooter. And I heard a rumor it came about because Nigel spotted you was taking basically a shot within centimeters of being inside the 3-point line. So he said, why not just take it from behind the line?
Yeah, well, that's it, Johnny. You've stolen the story.
Is that really it? No, because that's not the question. I just wanted to know if that fact is right.
Way to go, lad. Way to go. Way to do your research. Oh, what an idiot.
Oh, that's not the question. Idiot. I just wanted to find out if that fact was true.
Oh, what a fool.
So the question is, back then, you was the legitimate one. That's what
Steve Kane, to be fair.
Yeah, Kane, but Kane had that game where he chose when to shoot, where you just, if you was open, you'd shoot it. That's where I got my mentality from. But the point is, do you think the games took a step backwards? Because it seems like we're only taking threes again when we're chasing a game, where we'd gone through that era where we made it part of the game.
Yeah, look, I think I think you have a point in a way, in that I think the 3-point shot isn't used enough. And you look at the current GB team; they've got guys who can hit that shot. Yep. In Terry, Phil Pratt can easily hit that shot. Maybe Greg Warburton, but and I think I think you're right. It should just be used as a shot, as a genuine shot. If you're open at the 3-point shot, I say, if you're practicing a shot, whatever it is, if during the course of an offense you're open and that shot is the one that's available to you, if you don't take it, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're practicing if you're taking 100 3-point shots per session or whatever it is, and then you get that 3-point shot in a game and you don't take it, then it's a mistake. So you're quite right about that whole story about Nigel saying, look, you're taking this shot centimeters away. Why don't you just and so I started practicing it a little bit more, and it was just a great way of extending the defense. And our team, we didn't have those dominant forwards with MK Aces. So we relied on manipulating defenses.
You got that right. We didn't have no dominant forwards. You got that right.
Joe took the 3 because Joe took the 3 because I couldn't catch the pass.
I think we need to draw a veil over my passing if possible, lads, because
see a lot of that.
Things could get very embarrassing.
You see a lot of that.
He probably would have dropped it anyway, so you might as well.
Oh, absolutely. Of course I would.
Anyway, Joe, I've got a good question.
Yeah.
You've seen all the eras that you've gone through, all these eras that we've gone through. You started in 70s, 80s, 90s. We're 2000. We're into 2024. At your peak, which era would you have liked to play in?
Well, I think the half answer to yours is that I wish I'd have done better in the era that I did play in. I think I could have. Could I have done more? And the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, but
so that was probably the 90s, sort of the mid 90s. We had a good team then, and if I could have done a little bit better, maybe we would have done a little bit better.
But the thing is,
it's a tough question. I mean, I don't think I'd even get into the current team, to be honest with you.
In your prime?
No, I don't think so. I think.
You're mad. Are you crazy?
You're mad.
You lost your mind, son. You've been taking too much. Taking too much puff give, lad.
I'll tell you what, Joe. If you'd have been around in sort of 2002 to 2008, we'd have had a decent 3-pointer.
Yeah, of course you would have. then we wouldn't have needed a 2.5. So we would have gone, you know what I mean? The Black Flash together. We wouldn't have needed that fool that's on now.
I don't know. I don't know if I have a solid answer to your question, say, as to which era, because I like the era that I did play in.
Yeah.
But I wish we could have done a little bit better.
The thing is, you done absolutely amazing with the funding that you was given to do it. You know, you're training once a month. You think about now, or in my era, we was training every day. So that makes a huge difference because, like, for me, I thought I was lazy. Unless I had a training session to go to, I probably wouldn't go. But from like 98, once we had to train all the time, that just evolved my game. Obviously, going to Milton Keynes as well evolved my game because I was playing with great players, bar one.
I mean, I trained. I mean, before the funding even came into it, I mean, I trained 5 to 6 days a week anyway. You see
what I mean? See, that's the difference.
I used to spend half my week on someone else's sofa, just so I didn't have to keep traveling up and down the motorway to get to training sessions.
Oh, so you was a player?
Yeah.
I think I know the guy. Maybe is he a Hall of Famer as well?
Yeah, I'm sure he is. Well, I'd spend half the week on Tony Willard's sofa, or half the week on Nigel Smith's sofa, and that's how it was. I'd spend 2-3 days a week at home, and the rest was somewhere else because it just helped with getting training and stuff.
So one of the games that we're trying to get hold of at the minute is the start of your reign. So the 90s, the start, we think, began 93 Berlin, that final.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get hold of that game. What was that game like against the Dutch?
Well, that was, that was, it was a great game. And obviously that was really the start of the Dutch dominance with that great team that they had. Van der Linden, Janssens, Kamerling, René Martins, et al. I remember just before that, I think it was when was it? I think in '93, the Champions Cup. We went to the Champions Cup final in '93 with MK Aces, and we had a good tournament, and we made the semi-finals, but they were a bit, teams were a bit too strong for us. And I was talking to one of the other Dutch guys, Mustafa Jabari, and we were saying, well, we'll see you in Berlin with the Dutch team. And we hadn't seen Kuhn. I hadn't seen Kuhn for a long time, having played against him as a junior when he played low.
Yeah, me too.
And Mustafa said to me, well, you should see Kuhn now. He's playing tall. And I said, Kuhn playing tall? Don't be ridiculous. And of course, then we came to 93 in the final, and Kuhn was such a fantastic player playing tall. He was just he turned out to be one of the greats, didn't he? But it was a great final. I think the result was fair. That they were at that point a far better team than us, but it really was the start of us trying to solve the big conundrum of how do we deal with Kuhn Janssens, because we couldn't, we really struggled to contain him. And it wasn't until
we talk about him. Johnny talks about him a lot as well. He was the king of finding a mismatch. He always seemed to be able to find his shot in where he wanted it, but it was always seemed to be a mismatch. He post everyone up.
But yeah, I always found Joe. He never used to go anywhere fast. but it always be at the right spot.
Well, they were really what they were masters of, and they still are. If you look at the Dutch women's team, it's not that different. If you look at the way Mariska Bayer plays, it's a very similar game where they're masters at getting that particular player into his shooting spot, and he was a master because his shot technique was so hard to stop. It took us 2 years to figure it out, and in the end, we figured it out in time for the '95 semi-final in Paris, where what we did was we put someone in front of him, but as soon as he got the ball, we got someone like Callum to go behind him.
Yeah.
And his particular shot technique, where the ball went way behind his head, and that's why we couldn't check him from front, but he could be stopped if you got behind him. It took a lot of practice.
So he had the ball behind his head, a bit like Yo-Yo for France.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so looking forward, we got obviously Paris 2024 coming to us now. We got this crazy repechage that's coming through now. Do you think basketball is going in the right direction? Because obviously now we've gone at the Paralympics from 12 teams to 8 teams. And looking at it, we talked about it a bit. There's some big teams that probably won't be in Paris, including maybe the home team.
Yeah, I mean it's weird. It's a weird thing that's happened, and some odd decisions, I suppose you could argue, because you're basically you're going into a straight quarterfinal, more or less, aren't you? Although you do have to go through your pool games, but it's all about getting position, isn't it? I'm assuming, is it one will play 4?
Yeah,
how they're going to do it in the end.
So. Nobody knows at the moment. We assume.
No, but that's what happened with us in Athens. It was we came 4th in the group, and the Yanks won theirs, didn't they? And we got them in the quarters and turned them over.
I mean,
it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, someone like Australia, how they do. I mean, they're up against it. I mean, it's going to be tough.
Well, I think obviously it starts this week. I think they're up against it to actually qualify, because in their zone, only the finalist goes, and then you've got the second place goes to repechage. Now, 3 into 2 don't go. Somebody's going to miss out. Is it Iran, Japan, or Australia?
Yeah, Iran. They've emerged as in the last 2 years as one of the toughest teams around. Nobody will want to meet them when it matters the most. You wouldn't want to meet them in a knockout stage of any tournament. And Japan, on any given day, if they're all fit and the classification remains as it is, they're going to be tough to beat as well.
But touching on the classification, tell me your thoughts about it, because it's just so strange now, the classification. We got players that they've lost limbs, but they're very low pointers, including our own Greg Warburton, who's a 2, and then we've got the Japanese guy, he's a 2. It's tough, man, because they've got function. Yeah,
I mean, I think that the overall answer is the classification probably needs a top to bottom review, full stop, by whoever is in charge of classification. Maybe they need to look at it again. It was looked at a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They went from one system to the Strickendal system, which is more or less what we operate to nowadays. And maybe it does need looking at again. I mean, Johnny, you got any thoughts on classification?
And the question is,
just to clarify, live on this feed, the Israeli classifier said to me at the Stoke Mandeville's games, "I've got a funny feeling you're a 2." I just remained a 2.5. He never put me down. I was never a 2. So I stayed.
What you got to do, Joe? Watch this space. We're trying to get a clip of something we can't say. a training session that Johnny went to in Spain. There was a bike involved.
Yeah, but we all know what this clip is.
Yeah, but we can't find it.
I know you've got it.
Diego de Paz get it, but somehow he doesn't get it.
Diego de Paz.
So what would you do with the classification, Joe? Would you? So we're going into Paris. We're going to change the classification. Would you change everybody or change it for the new people?
Tough call. I think you're gonna struggle to change it for everybody, and you're probably risking a boycott. I mean, if you remember what happened, you guys will remember what happened to the Italians in 2011 with Ahmed, who up to that point was a 1-point player. They turned up as the favourites, or one of the favourites, in Nazareth, and Ahmed at the tournament, before the tournament started, was suddenly made a 1.5, which completely messed up their lineup. Yeah. They were furious, but there's nothing they could do about it. Now, if you were going to do something like that to everybody,
so is it too late? Because obviously you got the repechage, you got Paris. Should they just say after Paris, these are the changes that we're going to make?
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think it'd be a risky thing to do to make a wholesale change, such a huge wholesale change now, so close to Paris. So if they're going to make any big changes like that, it needs to be after, I think.
I do think that they need to take trunk into consideration again, because, if you've got a paralysed 2 against, a guy with a dicky hand and no limbs, his functionality is totally different. I mean, they can't do half the stuff.
No, I think there's definitely an argument to be had there, and that's why I think maybe a review is needed. And I think there needs to be a coming together regarding classification between the IPC and the I.W.B.F, because obviously there has been a difference of opinion.
Yeah,
and some people have suffered as a result. And I know opinion is divided on some of the decisions that were made. However, I mean, I look at it from the point of view of someone like Beth Wheeler. Now you look at Beth Wheeler, who I think would have walked into the GB women's team. I don't mean literally, but who clearly has a disability, but because it's in that grey area, she was declassified and was prevented from playing internationally. But you see her playing, for the university team and for Titans. She's a good player, and if you've seen her trying to walk across a car park or whatever, you can see that she should be allowed to play internationally, but she falls into that grey area.
But we're going to move away from all this classification, because I'm not gonna let you leave, because we've got 3 Scousers on this show.
Geez.
We've got that idiot who's a Tottenham fan, Peaky Blinder idiot. Tell me about what's happening tonight, Joe. How about, I don't know if people don't know you're a Liverpool fan, but we're loving it that you're on here. Tell me, we have our predictions. We got Liverpool Fulham tonight. That's one question. The second one, can we win the title?
Well, we can win the title, but that's been the case for the last 5 years. If you'd have asked me last year, the year before, and except for the year we did win it, yeah, we definitely can. But cans don't win a title. Yeah, we can. We're good enough to win the title. But let's see now. Haaland's got to come back from injury. De Bruyne has got to come back from injury. Well, he's back, isn't he? De Bruyne is back.
He's back last week. Yeah.
He'll be injured in a couple of weeks anyway. Don't worry about that.
He's almost as bad as Darren Anderson, isn't he?
Yeah. That's the only thing we're going to talk about. Tottenham
or Jamie Redknapp.
Yeah,
I'll tell you another who's bad with injuries. Timo Werner.
We signed another one today, haven't we?
Yeah.
He chose Tottenham over Bayern Munich. I don't know what the hell's he thinking.
I don't know what he's thinking. So, Joe.
Hang on. So, Joe, going to your induction into our Hall of Fame, what was that feeling like reading all the comments people had left about what kind of person you are?
Well, I'm not on Facebook for a start, but I mean, it was very flattering to be inducted into your Hall of Fame, especially when I look at some of the other people on that list. But yeah, I was sent some of the comments that people made, and that was in a way more touching, really, because people said some really nice things about me, and that was very flattering and most unexpected.
And all lies.
Well, actually, Joe, just so everyone in the world knows, we delete the bad comments. We just leave the good ones up.
I tell you what, we had to delete a lot.
I could well believe that, to be honest. You know, it won't be all good. I've definitely sort of, I'm sure I've pissed some people off along the way as well.
Yeah, so the others, Joe, do you like us? Have you been watching our show with the different people? Here's another question.
I watched the one with Dave Kiley and I watched the one with Steve Kane.
Beautiful. Who do you want us to get on next? We're trying. Who do you want us to get on next? If you could have two people that we can get on, who do you want on?
Well, I think from a local perspective, you need to try and get Phil Craven on.
Oh, yeah.
Because he obviously his knowledge, spreads across several decades as a player, but also as an administrator. So he's seen all sides of everything.
Yeah, we've got that one covered. He could be coming on soon.
What about this one? What about if I get Troy Sachs on? Is that going to make your nightmares worse?
No, I mean, Troy and I get on fine. We play together, in Can 2, and we don't have anything against each other at all.
I'm going to get Troy on. I want.
So who's the other one? Shut up, you. Nobody's asked you. I'm asking Joel, our guest.
I don't know, really. Maybe someone like Ian Laker.
Good shout. We haven't had any ladies on. Have you got any? Yeah, have you got any? We haven't had any ladies on the show. We've put the invite out there. Nobody's come back yet. Any suggestions on a woman front?
I'd say maybe someone like Anne Wilde, who's been around a long time, and was such a big part of the GB women's team prior to the current crop.
Good shout. Another Hall of Famer. Good shout. Well, boys, it has been emotional. It's been great to talk to you, JJ.
Lovely to
good fun.
Yeah. Peaky Blinder. Sorry we didn't get to talk about Tottenham, but they're rubbish anyway, so don't worry about it. We have to talk, just before we go, Joe, we have to talk about the non-league football. We've done that. We've talked about non-league football. This has been the Delinquent Show. Catch you later, JJ.
See you, boys.
Cheers,
Catch
Joe.
you later, JJP.
Cheers, mate.
And see you later.